Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back. Apologize for not being so active on here. So many things have been happening. I'm going to do a post about just the ongoings of getting into housing and fundraising and piratey stuff and all the fun stuff. But I also want to get back into more astrology and more tarot videos. Though, funny enough, like my days have been so active and busy that it's been challenging to find times during the day that I can like sit down and do it where you can see me clearly, because this newer ish phone does not really have a great camera at night. So I figure, you know what, the clarity is in the listening, if that makes sense. In any case, what I wanted to get on and talk about is something I've been kind of looking at for the past week, which is like, that 2023 is like currently right now we are in Mercury retrograde in Capricorn. So this year starts out with a retrograde. And that's not as uncommon as you would think, but it points to the importance of this year's Mercury retrogrades, and it also points to kind of this call back to the past theme for a good majority of the year. Like, think about that when all of humans start our calendars and you get ready to really like energetically consider it a new year. If that time and that energy is in the space of a Mercury retrograde, like that's gonna, if the things that happen right now and that we're called back to are going to affect us for the rest of the year, right? And you can really see a theme of like probably, I mean, don't think of it as like, oh my gosh, anything that's happened during this first Mercury retrograde of the year is just going to like hound me for the rest of the year. Though you can definitely see themes. And remember also some things that I've taught on this channel is that Mercury retrograde is kind of like this sandbox period, right? Like, consider it like the game Minecraft. It's a big sandbox, but combine it with like an etch-a-sketch. Let's say that during a Mercury retrograde, if you are intentional about it, you can shake up the etch-a-sketch, which completely restarts not completely restarts it, but it mostly restarts the sandbox, and then you can build from scratch, like as if you went into Minecraft and you said you just wanted a flat world to build from there rather than having it be reset up. Or you can call in and say, okay, I would like to have this world set up, but I want it to restart, or I want to continue on this path of these things that I was working on. And so I want the world to continue on the way it is. There are like, I mean, I'm still exploring it, but there are like infinite ways you could do it. It's one of the things that I find I feel grateful for about Mercury retrogrades. Like they come on often enough that if you really need to reset energy, it's kind of like, say your phone or a device is not acting correctly and it's not a major thing, you just restart it, right? And then usually it comes back on, everything's happy again and things work better, signals better. You might need to like clear some space, but otherwise you're fine, right? So it's kind of like that. Now, being humans, we typically don't just start over fresh with like, just a flat land. We either subconsciously or intentionally say, I want to have the land look this way, or I want to focus on these experiences, things like that. So like when we come into Mercury retrogrades, oftentimes we like more, I want to say it's more subconscious than conscious, but we typically get more into a space of like, re-going at things we've already been working on. But then spirit will also bring us back into issues that were unresolved as well. So like we tend to go kind of set it up from there. So consider that, in that like, you could set up your year, or what I'm going to say is you could have an effect on your year and everyone's year around you by the way that you know, the energy that you intentionally sit in during this energy right now. Now, some of the energy you've already been in for like the last week will also have an effect. So if you weren't fully conscious of it, then, yeah, those are going to have some effects there, but you still have time in this space, and including in the post shadow, just like you had in the pre shadow, you can have some effect there. So consider that your words and your actions, and especially your intentions, your prayers, your thoughts with the universe, the things that you allow yourself to think regularly, those are going to be the seeds that are planted that create themes throughout the rest of the year, right? Now, trying to decide. I pulled a card to kind of give us like a 2023 theme that is specific to the Mercury retrogrades, but kind of covers the overall theme of the year. And I think I'm going to start with that before I talk about the 4 Mercury retrogrades in Earth signs that we're going to have this year, because that's definitely significant. So the card that I pulled was the Queen of Pentacles. And I'm really happy to see her, especially in upright. Like, I'm a Capricorn stellium, so like that's my card. That's my jam. You know what I mean? But also it's like it's been a personal call towards me in my own life to be more Queen of Pentacles like. And so I can see that this theme also, it's funny because like, what did I just say? Like the 4 Mercury retrogrades of this year are in Earth signs, right? And so like now we have Queen of Pentacles in there, and I didn't even make that association until before I started doing this video, like just before, like, oh wow, you know what? It's Earth and Earth, right? But the interesting thing is the Queen of Pentacles is very like I think a lot of people kind of look at her and either she's just like this calm passive type, or that she's all about money and contracts. But really, actually, the Queen of Pentacles is quite inquisitive. She's also all about motherhood. She's definitely about family. There are, it can deal with contracts and things of that nature, but it's about making a flourishing garden, right? And it's also about the intention. Like, she looks at her pentacle intently, right? It's kind of her baby, her project, her, like, the space where she focuses her thoughts, right? And she's not in an energy of like with the Queen of Wands of like, here I am and I don't care how you feel about it. She's more in an energy of like, how do I feel about that? Like, like Queen of Wands would be like, if somebody told her about herself, she'd be like, I don't care. Whereas Queen of Pentacles might be like, like, do I really give off that persona? Like, she wouldn't necessarily be in a, like, she definitely would not, like, she's more mature than the Queen of Wands. She would not be in a space of like, oh, poor me, and somebody sees me this way. But she's mature enough to actually take feedback and be like, maybe I could do things a little bit differently. But if it doesn't align with who she is, she's like, nah, I'm not going to do that. But I'm also not going to fault the people who feel that way about me, because I'm going to keep doing this, right? And she's definitely in an energy of like self-exploration, self-love, things like that. But she also manages things around her. Like, she is good with money. She is good with her resources, and she's very resourceful. Like, she's not just sitting there holding a pentacle. It's not just money. She's got a garden all around her. She's got a mountain behind her. She's got all sorts of things going on, and she's sitting comfortably, much more like the Empress than the other queens are. Like, I consider her to be the most mature queen before you get up to the major arcana again. And so, like, a lot of the lessons that I think we're going to be looking at through 2023 are going to be about the momentum that is aligned with these aspects, like our ability to be open to things, our ability to create positive contracts, to vet things before we get into them, to be clear about the details, to ask the questions that tell us more about what are we jumping into, to be able to both be in a place of self-love, but without being so, I want to say, without being the opposite immaturity. Like, a lot of times people be in a place of having too loose of boundaries, and that creates chaos. But then you can go the other way and have like if Queen of Pentacles was reversed, it'd be like too strong of boundaries, like things like that. And it feels like this year instead is more about being in the energy of healthy boundaries, of give and take, of reciprocity, of gratitude, of being aware that, yeah, we do have an ego and we do like some material things, and we do, want to have that part of the human experience, though within balance of kindness and warmth and hearth and family, and things like that, not giving too much to other and not taking away too much from self. And also, because in reverse, both the King and Queen of Pentacles can represent narcissism. In upright, it's like not like being in a place of healthy, balanced self-love, though also like neither being like too self-righteous or being too self-centered about things, but also being self-centered in positive ways where, like, yeah, if you're giving too much to a certain situation, it's time to pull that in and be more self-centric, right? But there's a difference between like selfishness and self-centeredness and like the positive aspects of being focused on self and the negative aspects of being focused on self. It feels like also it's definitely going to be a year where we look at like the aspects of mother. Now, funny enough, like I've heard different things. It depends on what astrology practice you come from and things like that, but it feels like one of those um it feels like one of those aspects where it's like, how do I explain it? You know what? That thought decided to go away, so it's not relevant for right now. What I'm going to pivot to is that also 2023 is a 7 year, right? So that's chariot energy. That's oh, now I remember what it is. So depending on the tradition that you look at, some astrologers consider Sagittarius to be the father energy, even though it's not exactly opposite to Cancer, the mother energy, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Like in my mind, that does also make sense. But in other traditions and theories, it's Capricorn that is the father. Even though what's funny in various traditions, Capricorn is considered to be the most feminine aspect that you have, or the feminine sign of all of the signs, which is really kind of funny. Like you would think that it would be Pisces and whatnot, but if we consider Capricorn to be the father energy, then we see kind of this balance between mother father energy, and it makes sense to have the Queen of Pentacles then represent the year, because that is about the mother aspect. So you can't have the mother without the father. You can't have the father without the mother, at least not yet, and definitely not energetically. It's like you can't have feminine without masculine. Like they don't, they coexist symbiotically with each other. So it feels like it's going to be a year of balance, especially with that chariot card energy, that 7 energy. And 7 also, like, I'm excited for this year because 7 is an energy of like wisdom gained, and then 8 is the energy of wisdom applied. So like this year is going to be a lot to do with gaining wisdom, especially in the aspects of the earth signs, with motherhood and fatherhood and family. And it's like, and then the year after that is going to be a lot of that energy applied and much more stabilized, right? um and so like it's interesting to then take it and look at like, okay, so right now we are in Mercury retrograde in Capricorn. Then in April, we're going to have Mercury retrograde in Taurus. And then in August into September, we're going to have Mercury retrograde in Virgo. And then again in December, we're going to go back into Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, but it's also going to retrograde back into Sagittarius. So we have kind of a dual thing there. And so to me, it's kind of interesting is like, especially that last retrograde, it ends, at least the actual retrograde ends on the 1st of January. So we're going to again have another year that starts in a retrograde, but not so thoroughly as this year, like, or not starts, one that ends in the following year, but it's not going to be quite as strong as this year's is. But where it's something like Spirit has brought I'm going to say a bit of words to me. That's there's 2 things, and maybe you'll find them relevant, maybe you won't. One is exit through the entrance. The other one is the way out. The way in is the way out. And so we kind of, it's funny, like we kind of see this like the ending is the beginning is the ending sort of energy by having this year start out with, the middle to the end of a Mercury retrograde in Capricorn. And then when we end this year, 2023, we're also going to have another Mercury retrograde in Capricorn that ends in the following year. Though it's kind of one of those, like, the term go out with a bang, and so because it's retrograding into Sagittarius energy, then we have that fire sign energy. However, Sagittarius is the most mature of the fire signs and is the least likely to, like, it's not like if it was an Aries, it'd be like, oh my gosh, like wear your safety goggles and your helmets. But with Sagittarius, it's kind of a combination of expect the unexpected and expect that it's going to be a big bang, but it won't hurt you per se, it's like a planned fireworks show in a sort of way. And what's great is like if you're an astrologer or you listen to people like me, like you have some forewarning about that. So, especially now, while we're in this first Mercury retrograde of 2023, you can kind of set and sow seeds that will have an effect on what you experience at the end of this year and the beginning of next year for 2024, right? And I don't know which way you want to set that up. That's really up to you. Though, you could do all sorts of things with that energy. And I think, especially if we look at it like focus on the card and then focus on what energies are going to be strongest, which is, you look at what sign is Mercury going to be retrograde in. So, like right now, we have a Mercury retrograde in Capricorn. Not only is that a focus kind of on the father energy, like Capricorn is about business and court and a social architecture, right? Capricorn is that sign that recognizes that all the pieces are valuable and important. They all play a role, even the opposites, even the things that we don't get along with, the people we don't get along with, the places we don't like, stuff like that. Like it all has a point, a purpose, and a value, right? Capricorn is the sign that not only understands that, and it's also the sign that often, like if you have this life theme, if you have a sun sign or you have a stellium or one of your major aspects in Capricorn, that you often are in some kind of managerial slash human resources role of some kind. Like even if it's just small management of your family, it's still there. And you notice themes and stuff in your life that's about like valuing all the pieces, the pieces, all the players, all the games, all the good and the bad, the light and the dark, the ego and the id, the selflessness and the selfishness, right? And so these are going to be aspects that you're going to see that are stronger, that you can put, like if you put energy into the I'm going to say the dominant themes that go along with that Mercury retrograde, you can kind of work with that energy a lot easier than if you're trying to work on themes and things that don't have anything to do with that energy, right? And so those are aspects that we can look at right now for this current Mercury retrograde, and also aspects we can look at for this upcoming 2023 December, right? Now, the next Mercury retrograde we're going to have will be in Taurus. Now, Taurus is much more the second house. It's about materialistic things. It's about the actual house that we live in. I usually actually think of it as a closet in a house where you stuff like all the material things that you don't have space for in the rest of it, but it could be a lot of other spaces in a house because it also has to do with our career, the way that we make income. It has to do with our inheritances and things like that. So, and it's also the Empress is said to be ruled by Taurus, and by some people, the Hierophant is also ruled by Taurus. Depends on how you feel about it. But like these are energies that you can look at that typically are involved in these things: the ability to manifest abundance, femininity, that what is sacred, marriages, divorces, things of that nature. And these all do fit in with the Earth sign themes and with the Queen of Pentacles kind of stuff. So those themes are likely to come up, and you can kind of prepare ahead of time to say, okay, that's going to be a good time that I want to face some of these, or not, maybe not, like maybe it's face some of these things if you're doing shadow work, but it also could be I'm going to work now on getting things aligned so that I can harvest some things at that time, and also I can plant some seeds at that time that help me like manifest the experience that I want to have throughout the rest of the year and like later on in future years, right? And so like during that time you could focus on things that have directly to do with your house itself, with your finances, your ability to budget, your family stuff, children's things, especially because usually the Empress is considered to be pregnant, but that can also be pregnant with ideas. This could be a good time to go back to old creative ideas that maybe did not work before but could work now, stuff like that. It can also be a decent time to deal with family stuff, or to grow a family, or start a family, or change the dynamics of a family, things of that nature. And if it's a time that I definitely wouldn't suggest starting anything new during Mercury retrograde. So this is more like that could be a time that you might see or decide to kind of plan out the endings of certain family scenarios, divorces, things of that nature. Like it wouldn't be a bad time if that's something that's going on in your life to kind of look at. Otherwise, you might simply notice that that sort of stuff is happening. And it's funny because it's aptly timed for when when the official dates of quarantine and COVID stuff have ended in this past year. A lot of psychologists have been statistically looking at like how many like we're likely to see an increase in the dissolution of relationships that started and or continued on through COVID and stuff like that because our situations are changing and growing and things are opening back up again. So things we never would have gotten into because of emotional stressors, economic stressors, things like that, where they're no longer going to be necessary per se. And then also a lot of people had a lot more fighting because they actually had to like be around each other a lot more during those times. So like they're realizing that the grass ain't greener, or that like this isn't really what they want long term, and with that person. Whereas when we're not in quarantine times, typically we can kind of like be more social, avoid each other more, and kind of like even crappy relationships tend to continue on, especially if they're based on convenience or money or things of that nature. And so you might see a lot more of that sort of thing kind of growing between now and then, because it also like social architecture also has to do with that, as your contracts and government, things like that. So even in Mercury and Capricorn, we're still some of those themes are there. They're just heightened during Taurus energy. Then later on, when we look at the Mercury retrograde in Virgo, that's where it's like it's a good time to look at personal health issues, mental health issues, supplies, resourcefulness, things of that nature. Again, a lot of these are connected to family stuff, material stuff, financial aspects, things of that nature. And by then, we should really start to be able to see, like, depending on what we've called back into work on during that Mercury retrograde and the other things that have gone on through the year, we'll kind of have it's kind of like it'll show you like where did you do good on focusing your intentions on positive things? Where did you do good at resolving the more lower vibe things or the things that were kind of maybe holding you back? Where can you work on self? Like this, Mercury retrograde in Virgo is going to be much less to do with the outer and more to do with the inner. Like, that they both connect. They're both symbiotic. It's like light and dark and masculine and feminine. Like when you work on your inner world, it affects your outer world. Like when you start to love yourself better, you don't allow people to treat you crappy as much, like things like that. So there's definitely effects, but whereas like Mercury in Capricorn is more to do with the social architecture, so it has to do with both the individual and the whole. Like if it was Aquarius, it's the community. If it's Leo, it's the individual. But with Capricorn, it's how both play a part and how both are important. So we have that kind of that balance energy in that focus right now. And then in Taurus, it's much more about the inward stuff, the home, the career, the family, like more of the focus on like the direct inner. It's like the inner world, but not the self so much. And then when we get to Virgo, it's a lot of those same things, but it's more about the self. How are we looking at it? How are we communicating about it? And because Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and both energies are kind of this trickster energy, we're also going to be looking at the ways that we trick ourselves, that others trick us, that miscommunications play a part in things. Like what ways are people intentionally miscommunicating and creating like a confusing fog, and what ways are things being communicated in good ways but we're not understanding them, or we're misunderstanding how things go, stuff like that. And also because Virgo is the virgin and the prostitute, so there'd be a lot of that light dark aspect to look at, especially as we're likely to have a fair amount of Leo Scorpio energy on either side of that. And then you're also looking at like with that Virgo energy, it's connected to the high priestess. So it's definitely going to be, what are our prayers like? What are our secrets? What's our arcane knowledge, and things that have to do with the themes of that sort of stuff. And we'll be in kind of that harvest season energy already. And then from there, we have a little bit of time, and then we're back in Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, and then it goes into Sag, which really at this point in time, like, I mean, you could take it one of two ways. Either you could plan ahead for it now, and the ways that you do things now and through the next two Mercury retrogrades could change things. So you might want to have like a few alternatives for what you feel like you want to focus on. Like you could totally end up in this Mercury retrograde facing some shadow work or doing some light work that helps you change situations that you in this moment might be concerned would still be occurring in that moment, and want to work on those, or things that you don't think you have the time, intention, or focus to work on right now that could come up later, and they might end up having been resolved in this Mercury retrograde, in the space between it and the next one, or so on from there. And then by the time you get to the final Mercury retrograde of the year, it might be like, oh, you know what, I totally have the space and bandwidth to work on something entirely different now. And so, like, I would suggest one of those, like, be prepared, but also be open, which is, I mean, I'm an earth sign dominant, Capricorn stellium, so like that feels very much like appropriate earth energy, especially with this Queen of Pentacles card and all of the Mercury retrogrades being in earth signs. Like, it makes sense to me. Like, be prepared, but also be willing to be flexible, resourceful, creative. Don't make such firm plans that you don't feel like you can change your mind ever. Like, be in that Queen of Pentacles energy where you're like, you're open to things. Like, you know what? I thought that I wanted that, and or maybe I do still want that, but life is definitely calling me in this direction that I feel like could be really fun and beneficial. So maybe I will go that direction, and like, I don't have to forget about the thing that I was doing before, but I can go that way. Or vice versa, if there's something that you've wanted to really manifest or bring to fruition that is not going that direction, like, it would be much better to be in kind of that, like, I'm going to say gentle Dom energy. That's kind of what I think of the Queen of Pentacles and upright. Like, that's gentle Dom energy. Like, you have plenty of self-control. You don't need to know everything right now. You can be inquisitive and ask questions. You can learn things. You can also stop and go, if there's a lot of resistance here in this space, how am I, like, as Abraham says, how am I holding the cork down in the water? Like, how can I release my hands from it, allow it to be what it is, and let it float to the top so that it can be naturally resolved. So I'm not forcing it, or I'm not feeling like anything is missing or lacking. Because remember, nothing missing, nothing lacking, right? So if you kind of look at it like that, like, a good energy flow for this year is being in a space of, like, yes, consider what you want. It's good to know what you want. It's good to have a compass to lead you in the direction that you want to go. Especially if you have, like, if there's a part of you or all of you that is working on the aspects of home, like housing, family, motherhood, things like that, or achieving a balance in, like, mother father dynamics in your life, or healing mother father wounds and feeling wholeness there, things like that. Like, yes, figure out what you want. This is good energy to figure out what you want. It's good for clarity. Like, the Queen of Pentacles is also said to be an incredible psychic, right? So it's a good time of year for intuition for everybody, even if you don't normally consider yourself to be like somebody with intuitive skills. You'll have more access to that in this year than you would usually in other years. But be open to it. Like, what you thought that you wanted and needed might be something either that you can have later, or it might not have brought you the kind of happiness that a different scenario could. And maybe your ancestors and guides know that, and they're trying to lead you in that direction. It could also be that you cannot manifest what you want until you allow yourself to gratefully flow through a detour and learn a few things along the way that help align you with the person, places, and things that you want to be aligned with in healthy, balanced, benevolent ways, right? Okay, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and finish this up here. Thank you for listening, liking, subscribing, and just existing. Thank you for being born, and Happy New Year.